When Ivan Pavlov began his experiments in classical conditioning, there were skeptics.
When Ivan told me about the whole dog experiment, I was all nods and smiles, but I was thinking, this guy's definitely a nut job.
But once he published the work of the digestive glands, he was highly recognized for his research in classical conditioning and reflexes. Even after winning the Nobel Prize, he did not stop his research.
Even during his death, he was researching. He had me sitting on the side of his deathbed, writing down everything that was happening to me. Have you ever watched your teacher die a slow death? I'll give you a hint. I still get nightmares.
In the next hour, summarized into 2 to 5 minutes, we'll look at the son of a preacher who took the psychiatrical world by storm, from his birth until his death. This is the making of a scientist and a hero. This is the story of Ivan Pavlov, the true Hollywood story.
The dream for life's ambition was to be
Ivan Pavlov was born on September 14, 1849 in Ryazan, Russia, the oldest of 11 children. His father was a village priest, and it was Ivan's ambition to follow in his father's footsteps. All of that was going to change when he read Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species and discovered a passion for science.
He was going to be most likely the greatest priest in the whole village after I died. He was going to carry the family business, but if he wanted to follow the path of hell, fine by me. I don't care.
He transferred to St. Petersburg University and afterward received a medical degree from St. Petersburg Military Medical Academy in 1879. He received a PhD 4 years later. Pavlov was appointed the professor of physiology and conducted most of his research investigations at the medical academy. He was particularly interested in the nervous mechanism that controlled digestive tract's various glands. In 1889, Pavlov started work on his most famous experiment. He severed a dog's gullet and pulled the upper end out through its neck. This way, whenever the dog would eat, the food would drop out through its gullet rather than reaching his stomach. He found that the nerves in the dog's mouths were stimulated after every feeding because gastric juices would flow. Basically, the dog would drool.
When I met Ivan and he told me about that part of the experiment, I was disgusted. It's not really material to open a date with, but he had other redeeming qualities, promise.
Next, Pavlov confined a dog in a silent room, held by loose straps and fed through an automatic apparatus. The dog had a small tube attached to it to collect drool. First, Pavlov gave the dog food, which made the dog drool. He then gave the dog more food while ringing a bell. He repeated this step several times, and the dog would drool every time the bell rang and he was given food. Soon enough, the dog began to salivate every time the bell was rung, even if it was not fed immediately after. With this, Pavlov had discovered classical conditioning. If another dog heard a bell ring, its normal reaction would be not to drool. However, because Pavlov's dog had been trained to believe that food would follow the sound of a bell, drooling became a normal reaction after hearing the bell. However, after a while of the dog hearing a bell without being fed, it would eventually return to its normal instincts. This discovery led to Pavlov being awarded the Nobel Prize in 1904.
Of course he deserved that award. His research into classical conditioning was brilliant, almost as good as attempting to strengthen international diplomacy.
Pavlov's research did not stop there. He continued researching until his death and was recognized by Russia as one of its best scientists, even though he was extremely anti-communist.
In Soviet Russia, classical conditioning researches you.
On his deathbed in Leningrad on February 27, 1936, Pavlov continued his research, having a student record his dying process.
Never again.
Although he has been dead for decades, Ivan Pavlov will always be remembered throughout history, through comics, media, and TV shows such as The Office.
In school, we learned about this scientist who trained dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell by feeding them whenever a bell rang. So for the past couple weeks, I've been conducting a similar experiment. Dwight, one output.
Okay.
Altoid?
Sure.
Intoid?
Input? Yes.
What are you doing? What?
I don't know. Well, my mouth tastes so bad all of a sudden.
Ivan Pavlov will never be forgotten.